Welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast with your host, Troy Wallace, a podcast for human resources information systems professionals to help you elevate your HRIS career. We always say no one gets into HRIS on purpose, but it sure is interesting to find out how they did. We interview your HRIS peers to find out how they got tricked into the industry and what lessons and tools they use to progress their careers along the way. We discuss industry trends, AI, and even talk candidly about all the most popular HRIS platforms. Just think of it as the closest bar just outside the entrance of your favorite HR technology conference. Now you get it. Welcome in.
I just looked at my daughter and was like, do you know what? Screw the lot of them. I'm not going to turn up into the world and be a fraction of me, because if I do that, I'm telling my daughter that it's okay for people to kind of squash you a little bit so that you can conform to their world. All of a sudden, I went in thinking I was going to be like, yeah, here comes Gabi, let's go and let's do everything. Just kind of like, actually, could you just be like 1% of who you are? Actually, I don't want to be 1% of Gabi. I want to be 100% of Gabi. That if you are looking at picking up a recruiter to look for candidates for you, if they don't use the word Boolean and you can't see a good solid Boolean they've used, you shouldn't be paying them 25% for anything, right? They need to know how to hunt. Otherwise, they're useless to you because they're not seeing true talent pools. Logically, there is a lot of data in your hands, in your possession, about what these candidates may or may not call themselves, the words they use, but those words don't align with your filters, which means you had a huge disconnect. And the technology stack actually almost put like that nice kind of cuddle around the candidate discovery process. So it's about giving each recruiter the power of knowledge to be dangerous. And then included in that is then the technology stack we've developed to be able to do all this unique research on keywords, variations, translating Boolean strings, executing Boolean strings on different platforms. So it's very much about how do you combine the power of knowledge with the sophistication and efficiency of technology to actually help your team become the best hunters they can be.
Welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast, recording live in our studios in beautiful downtown Omaha, Nebraska. Today we have a great interview, high energy, with Gabi Preston-Phypers. She is the co-founder of the AI Boolean search tool for recruiters called TooledUpRacoons. So you can find that at TooledUpRacoons.com. Again, we're just getting the nicest people to talk to on the podcast, and this one is no different. She's super high energy and just a delight to speak with and to listen to. So I saw her on the speaker list for the HRTX conference, and as I dove down the rabbit hole, I just got more and more interested in this technology she'd built around Boolean searching. She and her husband have created this product based on some pain points in their own recruiting business. And it's really interesting to hear that, and also the progression of her career in general and how she found herself in this space. Definitely hits on the same theme we always talk about, is nobody gets here on purpose. Now, here are 3 gigantic things you're going to learn from the podcast. Number 1. Learn what she means by putting a hug, or she calls it a cuddle, around your recruiting searches. Number 2. How she uses the concept called Data-centric hunting to help recruiters find the right candidate pools. Number 3. How they built their tool, TooledUpRacoons, to solve their own search problems, and then brought it to market to benefit the rest of us in the recruiting world. And there's so much more. So I burned through a lot of clips in the cold open just because I thought there was so much that I wanted to include and highlight. So definitely listen to the whole podcast. Of course, we do the lightning round. Should come up around the 35 to 40 minute mark. The show notes, as always, will be packed on this one, so you'll be able to link up to her product, her LinkedIn, and all of her social media handles. If you want to see our smiling faces and watch the video, it'll be up on the YouTube channel. Again, all the resources mentioned and links will be in the show notes. We certainly appreciate you following the show on your favorite podcast platform and leaving feedback either on Apple or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you consume your podcasts. Now, if you are interested in sharing your story on the HRIS Careers podcast, please go to HRISCareers.com/podcast. There's a little form you can fill out. There's a little quick voice memo widget you can use. And of course, if you're an employer looking for HRIS talent, you can list for free right now any of your opportunities on the HRISCareers.com job board. And if you're looking for opportunities, certainly go over there and fill out your profile and sign up for the job alerts. You'll get the best opportunities delivered straight to your email inbox. Without further ado, please enjoy this high-energy, inspirational, and educational interview with Gabi Preston-Phypers. Gabi Preston-Phypers, welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast. Hey, we really appreciate you taking the time. Where specifically are you in England?
So I'm in the Cotswolds. So probably like for you guys, about half an hour from Bristol. So west side of England.
Well, I looked it up and I was just like, that looks like the most beautiful place on earth. Is it one of those places where everywhere you look just looks like a postcard?
Most of it, yeah. We have a couple of bits that got a bit built up, unfortunately, but majority of it is just Greenland, and there's cows and sheep, and my kids are like, Mom, look at that tractor, and it's like these wheels are like bigger than my car kind of thing. That's the vibe we rock in this household.
And so are you in a more rural area or close to a big city? Rural.
Much more rural. So I used to work in the city, and I used to be based in Essex. So it was a lot more built up. And where we've moved to in the Cotswolds, we did that, just over 2 years ago now. It's literally, I look out of my garden, out of my window, should I say, and it's just fields everywhere. Like, it's so calming. It's unreal.
I live in Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of the country. And, in the metro area, there's 1 million people. But you drive at a certain point, and then it's just cornfields. And then you drive another 10 miles, and then it's cornfields. And then you drive another 10 miles, and it is cornfields.
Keep going.
The rest of the state. Just keep going. Absolutely.
Well, I love that.
So I will have done your intro, so people have a little bit of background on you. What I want to do to get into kind of your journey is I listened to another podcast. I can't remember. I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it. But this was something that you said, and it's not a perfect quote of what you said, but you said, they like the idea of having someone like me, but I don't think they really wanted someone like me. And you were talking about being hired. Can you dig into, explain what that is and kind of how that plays into building your own business and getting out of the corporate world?
Absolutely. So that quote, I can't even remember where that came from. And to be fair, I probably said it a couple of times, but I think a lot of companies have this lovely idea that they want someone who's high energy, pushes boundaries, is dynamic, is kind of progressive in their thinking and doesn't just settle for the status quo. And I think a lot of them like that kind of concept on paper. But when I left university, I studied business and economics at university, and then I went straight into banking. I actually went straight into JP Morgan. And I think in such a large corporate, as much as they want people to be different, to kind of shake things up and keep things fresh, there is a lot of culture around this is how we do things. And therefore, actually, as I came in being Gabi, as I am, I'm very much like, this is who I am. This is what I do. Like, let's go play, and started questioning things. People became a bit like, no. Could you just be quiet? Could you just not say anything? Could you just follow what everyone else is doing and do as you're told? And I'm like, well, that wasn't why you brought me in. You brought me in to change things, to shake things up, to make things more efficient. And what was really interesting during that kind of first phase of my career, that it very often wasn't said out loud, that they just didn't want that kind of energy and that shift in culture. They were like, almost like probably shouldn't have hired you of that personality type, or shouldn't have hired you because you were dyslexic to tick the box because we weren't ready for supporting that. So actually what ended up happening is I kind of felt my voice and my confidence crushed a little bit. Because all of a sudden I went in thinking I was going to be like, yeah, here comes Gabi, let's go and let's do everything. So it's kind of like, actually, could you just be like 1% of who you are? And it was quite interesting going through that journey and kind of coming to the end of it, being like, actually, I don't want to be 1% of Gabi. I want to be 100% of Gabi. I want to turn out like, I never mean offense to anyone. Like, I'm genuinely just incredibly inquisitive person. And I left banking and ended up just completely jumping out the career, just being like, actually, maybe I just don't fit in banking. Maybe it's just not my vibe. and went and did some software sales for a little while at a startup that was based in Canada. And I was actually their first UK-based sales rep. So I was doing a lot of the marketing, the selling, like everything beginning to end. And it was so much fun. But then when I returned back from maternity leave, they were like, actually, now you've got a daughter and a child, your priorities have shifted. So again, they're like, you need to be demoted to a lesser role. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. We're going through this journey again of being like, you can be Gabi, you can be the world around you, but you can't have what you want to have in life. And it was kind of in that moment where I just looked at my daughter and was like, do you know what? There is a lot of them. I'm not going to turn up to the world and be a fraction of me, because if I do that, I'm telling my daughter, and now I've got 2 daughters now actually, that it's okay for people to kind of squash you a little bit so that you can conform to their world. So I was like, do you know what? I'm out. I'm going to go and carve out a future and a journey and a business that allows me to kind of really hunker into where my skill sets are and how I can really help other people just come as they are and just smash life and be happy and don't get squashed. So that quote that you reference really kind of stems everything that I kind of hold into my head when I walk into a room. It's like, are you going to squash me, or are we going to elevate up and we're all going to drive forward together? And it's just made me very aware of just being me and doing what I'm great at and maneuvering positions where I'm trying to be quiet, silenced, should I say.
Yes. And so obviously HRIS, Human Resources Information Systems, that's the type of people that listen to this podcast. So some of us come from the functional world of human resources. And when we hear a story like that, we're like, we smell a lawsuit. You know, that's I think that's more they're thinking of. Yes, right.
They absolutely.
Right,
I mean, especially, I guess, like my time at JP, I think they were a bit like, oh my God, we have to tread really gently, right? It's at that time, it's like, I'm a woman, I'm dyslexic. Like I was taking all those flags where I could cause a pain. But in my mind, it's okay, right? I think so many companies are really scared. Like, do you know, on a piece of paper, they're like, I really want someone who's like this. And then it comes to reality and they're like, dude, maybe I didn't mean it quite that much. And it's a learning curve for them to learn their boundary on actually how do you assess how much of a boundary pusher you want, or a progressive thinker, or a high energy person. So actually for me, I was like, do you know what? This was a learning curve for both of us. I wasn't the right fit for you and you weren't the right fit for me. But I think the lawsuits happen when we don't actually just say it out loud and call it like a spade is a spade. You either fit or you don't. Could I move Gabi to a better role that's better suited to her skill set? Yes, no. Those are the type of conversations I think often that lack in organizations and actually do result in those lawsuits. But luckily for them, I'm very calm and I'm like, actually, it was a moment in time in my journey. I don't think they've ever been stupid enough to hire another miniature me ever again. Like, no, thank you, Gabi. One was enough. Go that way.
Well, and the world has a way of working things out, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe thank goodness it happened, because now you're out doing what you did. And what attracted to me is, so I think I became aware of you. I think you were going to be speaking at the HRTX or RX, I can't remember thing. And I was like, oh, who's this person? Oh, Boolean search. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to click on this. And then I clicked more. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. So as I understand, I'll let you explain it, that you ended up going into the recruiting business, and you explain how that happened. And then now this tool that you've created is kind of built out of fixing your own problems.
Yeah. So what was it? So when I left the software startup company, my husband actually owns a recruitment agency. He specializes in mobile robotics. And since he graduated university, he's always been in recruitment. So it's always been something that was in the background of my world. And for years and years and years, he's been like, Gabs, come and join the business, come and step in. You'd be amazing at it, because it's a people-based business and you are fantastic with people. Come this way. So I stepped into the recruitment business and I said, look, before I go any further, my role at JP Morgan was all about operational efficiency and excellence. Like, I am a hardcore operations geek. I like things working effectively and efficiently. And that's just who I am. So I walked in the business and kind of tore it all apart and went, this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing things this way? And what transpired is there's just a lot of baggage where people go from different businesses, they get taught different things. And they're like, well, it kind of works. So we'll just do it again rather than stepping back and reviewing. And once I'd kind of finished going through the business, I sat down and went, you know what, there's one piece I just can't get my head around. And it was the candidate discovery piece. And I was like, we've got access to job boards and social media and all this great stuff. But yet still using Boolean for candidate discovery was the most accurate way to do things. But still, it was so painful to do the research on alternative keywords and acronyms, to build Boolean strings, to update it with different variations, to track it if I wanted to use a Boolean string I'd already used on a previous role for one that came in today. It was just really clunky. And I just looked at Mitch and went, we know enough to be really dangerous when it comes to candidate discovery. It's what we're really, really good at. I said, but is there a way we could build technology to help our business become more efficient, to strengthen our ability to see what I define as true talent pools, and then really hunt into them to find the best people, not just the first people? So along came this journey of TooledUpRacoons, which we've now had for 4 years in September. I've kind of flown by, and we've actually come to a point where we've created this platform that we now actually sell to talent acquisition teams and agencies, depending on their needs. And the technology stack actually almost put like that nice kind of cuddle around the candidate discovery process. So within the tech, you've got 8 hours worth of sourcing training. So it's about giving each recruiter the power of knowledge to be dangerous. And then included in that is then the technology stack we've developed to be able to do all this unique research on keywords, variations, translating Boolean strings, executing Boolean strings on different platforms. So it's very much about how do you combine the power of knowledge with the sophistication and efficiency of technology to actually help your team become the best hunters they can be. And that's kind of the journey we went through, and are still living very much as a real life right now, talking to businesses about those inefficiencies in candidate discovery and the impact it has on their business. So like you said, my journey hasn't been a straight path, but actually what happened to me in my past and the experiences I've had in a big corporate, the operations side, and then into recruitment has led me to develop that tech and now sell it to clients all around the world.
So here's why, there's several reasons why it resonated with me when I started digging into what it was. And number one, I mean, this has probably happened 20, 25 times in my career. So, you know, we have our direct clients, but sometimes we'll end up going through the large staffing companies through it. And then they've outsourced their sourcing to somebody else, so there's all these layers. And we'll end up getting sourced by a sourcer, and then they come back to, I'll call it the prime contractor. And I'm like, oh, it's KPMG? We're in their database.
Yep.
Why didn't they just find us, right? And I have to believe that even all these companies have spent all this money accumulating these large databases, and they can't get the data out, or they can't get accurate data out, or they can't get the right data out. And that sounds like it's, in some cases, they need to understand how to Boolean and create these searches.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think there's like this wave of complacency to a large extent. Like I see it all the time where recruiters win a contract and then outsource it because they're like, oh, the candidate discovery piece doesn't matter. And I'm sitting there going, you do realize this entire process falls apart without a candidate, without the best candidate. The whole thing is mute. Like, who are you interviewing?
Right.
Who are you talking to? Who are you hiring? None of this matters if you can't do this really critical piece up front. But I think with how much technology there is out there, people are of this mindset that the technology is designed to help them. And I talk about it a lot. So like if we bring up like job boards, right? CV Library, Monster, Total Jobs. We could bring up things like LinkedIn Recruiter, Light, Corporate, whichever version you want. There is this underlying assumption that these guys have filters and therefore the filters are good enough. That's what we need. That's going to find me the best talent. And I have proved over and over and over again until I am blue in the face. I almost look like a Smurf at this point where I just turn around and go, these filters don't work. They don't work because candidates are now allowed to write whatever they want on their profiles. When someone submits a CV to you and it enters your ATS, the job title is whatever their company has given them. It won't necessarily match the filter criterion that you have within the technology stack you're using. So actually, logically, there is a lot of data in your hands, in your possession, about what these candidates may or may not call themselves, the words they use, but those words don't align with your filters, which means you had a huge disconnect in how you can actually search through your data. And the only way to navigate that is through what I define as smart Boolean, not dumb Boolean, because there is a difference, but leveraging the power of Boolean to capture those candidate uniquenesses. So how they write their job titles and their keywords and all this great stuff. And then using that through the platforms that you adopt to find the people you want to play with. And that's where that disconnect is coming. It's that complacency, assuming that tech is going to help you, but not really understanding why there is a disconnect between what's sitting in the database versus what you can filter. It's massive in some instances.
Right. And check me if I'm wrong here, but I'm going to consider, so we do a lot of work in the Taleo and the Oracle world. Their applicant tracking systems now is becoming Oracle Recruiting Cloud. And I don't know, 7-8 years ago, probably longer, they started switching people from more of kind of a Boolean search, which I like. Now, I will say I have a head start, right? Because in HRIS, a lot of us write a lot of SQL statements, right? So it's all based on kind of a lot of Boolean logic. So we have a head start. So we like that better. But they wanted to move everybody to more of like a faceted search, which is essentially, right, would be the same as using filtering.
Yep.
And it's just not as accurate.
But the problem is, the challenge we have is when you talk about the bubble of people who really understand Boolean or really have the patience, interest, or whatever it is to build Boolean, that population is quite small. There is a bigger population out there who just don't want to get involved in it. They're a bit like, yeah, it's fine. I'll choose a bit of a filter. It'll be absolutely fine. And it doesn't matter how many times you tell them how broken it is, they won't do anything to change the process because it requires effort. It feels scary. They're a bit like, oh, well, people told me Boolean's really hard. And historically, there has really been no trusted mechanism on how to build this Boolean. So what they've done is the majority of recruiters have gone, not for me, thanks for the invite, but I'm going to go and sit in a filter. But because of that behavior, tech companies lead into developing tech for the majority, not the minority. So those platforms will still accept Boolean. But this is why, again, for us, when we looked at TooledUpRacoons, we were like, I know someone said to me, they're like, are you going to embed in someone's tech? So like, am I going to have an automatic connection into, I don't know, a job board or a CRM? And I said, no, like, I want to enter the world where every single recruiter has the power to leverage Boolean in a way that's accessible to them and isn't overwhelming and isn't overcomplicated, and they can take it wherever they want to hunt. But historically, that kind of tech hasn't existed. So again, they just kind of hold off and just go, okay, I'm just going to be mediocre. But the problem is for me, I think a lot of kind of your in-house talent acquisition teams, when they access agencies and ask them the question, and I've said it before, I said it in the, TA Tech Unboxed podcast, that if you are looking at picking up a recruiter to look for candidates for you, if they don't use the word Boolean and you can't see a good solid Boolean they've used, you shouldn't be paying them 25% for anything, right? They need to know how to hunt. They need to be leaning into that. Otherwise, they're useless to you because they're not seeing true talent pools. But there has to be a drive from the talent acquisition teams and also from the founders of these agencies where the expectation is, we are finding the best talent. We are being inclusive in our search. And therefore, that will then lead to the actions and the outputs that should be happening right now.
Right. And I'm going to give you a second reason why, when I started digging into what you're doing, why I'm like, oh, that's really good. And selfishly, I'm looking for things that could help my customers because they use Taleo. I want them to keep using it. I want them to use it well. And I know that they're not using Boolean search, and most of the recruiters don't have a good power of Boolean. So that's the second. Well, I'm going to get to the second thing, but what I want to do is we're going to have a ton of the show notes are going to be packed with things that are linking to your stuff. But one thing I wanted to point out specifically, just going to your blog, and we'll link this. And there's an article on how to construct a Boolean search that gets you the most relevant candidates for your job roles. If people just go read that, right? I mean, I'm not going to say it's to change their life, right? But But, if it's something they're not doing or the power of, just going and reading one of those articles, I think would be really helpful. It was helpful to me. So that's great. And then the second thing that I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys are trying to solve is, and I'll put it in my context, is I've been doing a lot with AI, right? AI prompts. So I've got all these AI prompts and libraries, and I'm storing them in Google Sheets, and I've got them in a Google Doc, and then I got them in my Word document, and they're just all over the place. I know I've created all this great stuff to prompt for all kinds of different things. I can't find it, right? And I sure can't share it. And it sounds like that's the second thing that you're trying to solve for people.
Well, we do that within the Boolean world. So specifically, for example, so one thing that happens a lot is recruiters love wasting time. Love it. So in your context of writing prompts for AI and what it needs to do to extract it, you'll tend to write one and then lose it and then be like, where did I hide it? What did I do with it? Where's it gone?
Yeah, just being able to find the stuff that you wrote, essentially.
So when you're using artificial intelligence and you are writing loads and loads of prompts, you'll write one and you'll go, that's wicked. And then you'll store it somewhere in a document, on an email. You might WhatsApp it to yourself. And then later on, you'll be like, actually, I want to use this again. Like that prompt was so good. And then you just can't find it. It's just lost in the world. The interesting thing is for us, we've kind of taken that challenge for Boolean. So Boolean today, people will create Boolean strings. Like they'll just write them on the fly, do a search and be like, okay, cool. I filled the job. Let's move on. And that string tends to be embedded in a LinkedIn, in a job board. It's lost. It's just lost in this amount of data. What we've done within the tech is actually we use artificial intelligence to help you research and build a Boolean string. So actually you just put in a couple of keywords and it will literally go, what's the alternative job titles, industry, key skills, blah, blah, blah. Literally brings it all for you and then translates it into a Boolean string. But the nice thing in it's not just about creating that string, it's about centralizing that library, about having a library that has the best of the best searches and it's folded, it's organized. So if that job came back in today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, you'd go, okay, cool. I'm just going to go into the search in TooledUpRacoons. I'm going to pull up the string I used to help me fill that position previously. I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to use it again as your starting point. Again, what's the point of starting from scratch? It's about embedding a process where your strings are centralized, they're stored, they're reusable, because if they're good enough to fill it, why are we starting again? And that's one of the elements within the den.
Right. And it's one of those things that it seems simple, like it shouldn't be a problem, but it's a problem. Like I as much as I'm like, okay, I got to store this, I'm going to do it all in one place. Guess what? 7 days pass. And now, for whatever reason, I've gone and I've just like you said, I put one in email and one in this document, one in an Evernote, and just collecting it. And then as I understand, then you could share those even with bigger teams.
So what we've done, again, this is where I said, when I say to people, TooledUpRacoons isn't just about building Boolean, it's about wrapping our arms around the whole lot. Once you've built your strings, you can enrich them on the go. We've got various highlight functions. You can translate your strings. But one of the key bits for me is about that power of sharing with your colleagues. So historically, when people have been like, oh, I'm going on holiday or I'm off sick, or can you just cover this job for me? Or even one of your colleagues has picked up a similar position, instead of just going, oh, here's a job description, fill your boots, you'd actually go into the platform and go, hang on, here's the string I used. Let me just share that with you. And you share it within the platform. So actually, they get a kickstart to their search. They move quicker. Everything executes quicker. And it's seamless. And I think a lot of companies as well, they're kind of like, yeah, my team's using Boolean. And I think there's this weird mentality where people don't understand that actually the Boolean strings you create are part of what makes you unique as a business. Because your Boolean string, if it's done properly, won't look the same as my Boolean string. It will look different. It will feel different. But the Boolean is the difference between you finding the candidate first and me finding the candidate first. So for a lot of clients who are like, oh yeah, my team use Boolean and their Boolean strings are all over the place. From a risk management perspective, that's really dangerous. Because if one of your teammates leaves and just walks out the front door with all those Boolean strings, you've still got that job to fill. You're starting that job from scratch because you haven't retained any of that intellectual property on your Boolean. So the library, the collaboration, and the holding of this data is so critical for that speed and accuracy of execution more than I think people realize.
Yes, and let me. The beauty of this podcast is just networking with fantastic people, and then every once in a while getting a little bit of free consulting. So let me ask you a couple of specific questions that are relevant to of my business. So, and maybe this is just a problem in the industry in general, but I will give you, for example, I leave my resume out on the different job boards as kind of client bait, right?
Yep.
And I get calls periodically, and it's good. And I get information about what's going on in the industry when people are inquiring about hiring me. But I have the word Workday, and Workday is a big software platform.
And one of our clients.
It is not, yes, it's not what I do on a day-to-day basis, but I've interacted with the software. I've done some conversions. But anybody who actually read the resume would know that I am not a qualified Workday consultant, but it's on the resume, right? So I get 13 emails a day from recruiters saying, hey, don't you want to look at this role? And I look at it because HRIS Careers, we have a job posting board. I'm very interested in the whole world, but it certainly is not relevant to me. Is there some sort of solution that would help a recruiter with relevancy, right? To understand that, it was only mentioned once in the resume, so maybe this person isn't, a full-blown Workday consultant?
I mean, there is a solution. It's called Read It. It's always my first solution. I think sometimes you look for really complicated solutions. The best solution is to read it. The second solution is how they've used the word Workday in their searches and actually which job board they've put it on. So each platform has slightly different fields in which you can input Boolean. Okay. So we go to platforms like CD Library. Okay. CD Library is one field, and it's literally, you have to vomit the job titles and the keywords and everything into one big mush. And it's a bit chaotic. Okay. But it does mean that if you use the word Workday, the scenario you've given is very, very real, by the way. There are people who have referenced that they worked with or contracted on a project for Coca-Cola, but they've not actually worked for Coca-Cola. But when you have job boards that don't allow a really clean breakdown of Boolean into kind of like a job title, company, key skills, you run the risk of it getting very diluted. Where if you move to things that we look at the other extreme, when we start looking at things like LinkedIn Recruiter, they do have those very clear field breakdowns, and you're able to put Boolean in job title, companies, and keywords. So actually, they are looking for people who have worked in Workday. They could put that as a company field. If they're looking for people who have worked on Workday projects, there are probably particular words outside of Workday that are unique to that type of project, because there does tend to be like a skill or a technique that they use that is unique to that industry and sector. You can add that into your Boolean string. That's how they do it. Your Boolean string has to be smarter, and that's the only way to navigate those situations.
So you could build something that would, just like AI does. AI tries to guess, right? Real AI is trying to guess what the next word should be. So they need to understand that people that are truly qualified for this job typically have
A, B, C, and
Workday. Yes. And that's what they're not doing.
That when I talk to people, and it's this new concept I talk about called data-centric hunting. Okay. And when I say that, people are like, oh my God, that sounds so difficult. What I'm actually saying to you is I want you to take a Boolean string, like in its rawest form. It can be completely naked. Start from nothing. And what I want you to do is go and look at the profiles of the people you've placed within that specialization. So if we're looking for someone who's worked on a Workday project, okay, in a specific area, whatever it is, go and look at those candidates and look at what the words, the terminology they used on their social profiles, look at what they wrote about in their CVs, and then use the data you're reading back into your Boolean string. Reverse engineer your search, reverse engineer your build.
Oh, all right.
And then execute a search, right? This is why, like our tech, we have a Chrome extension. We can highlight words and add them. So where most recruiters do this whole yes, no dance, I'm sitting there going, well, if you're saying no, why are you saying no? What data points are on that profile you're seeing that have turned you off? What ones have turned you on? If they've turned you on, you're like, actually, I want to see more people have used that acronym, that typo, that way of writing manager, all this kind of stuff. but make your Boolean smarter. So we highlight, right click and add it to your Boolean string, rerun your search. And what happens when you execute sourcing or even business development in this kind of mentality, you actually end up with what I call true talent pools or client pools, right? They're the people you really want to see that hit the criterion, that actually use words that may not have been on the job description you were provided with. So it just gets smarter and smarter and smarter. And honestly, I use Boolean for business development. I use it for marketing campaigns. I use it for candidate discovery. But it is all data-led execution rather than just kind of I hope that's about right. And where you end up with mistakes like what you're experiencing, where people are messaging you with the stuff that's actually completely irrelevant to you.
Yeah. So, and I don't know. I mean, I know that they probably have some, flashy system that is going to look for anything that is Workday, and then is just pumping it right into an email system, and it's going out, and it's really generic. And guys, long term, guys, that upsets us. We don't like it as people you're trying to attract.
100%.
You didn't do your job. It's lazy, and we get to know that. Hey, when I get an email from you, guess what? We're going to start ignoring it because we know it's probably not relevant.
Absolutely. But this is the problem. So do you know what happens with the candidate sourcing part of this dance, or even business development? People go, oh, do you know when you say to someone, how was your candidate's discovery process? What's it like? Is it solid? They're like, yeah, do you know what? It's really good, apart from no one responds to my message. I kind of sit there in silence and I'm like, I'm going to tell you with like 85 to 90% confidence that the reason they're not responding to you is because you haven't got a clean search. And therefore the message that you're sending them isn't resonating because you're hitting a load of cannon fodder. Like people, it's like, if this message isn't landing with me, I'm not responding. You have to make it accurate, targeted. They will play in the sandpit with you. Obviously, if you're messaging, I'm allowing the 10% slippage for rubbish messaging. But fundamentally, it all falls short at the execution of the search and what you're building in that target list, where most people go wrong, but they can't see it. And they're almost scared to look that far back to acknowledge that's what's wrong because they don't know how to solve it. Hence why we've invaded the world in the way we have.
This is part of why, we want to educate people on this subject and other things. And with HRIS Careers, we have a job board, right? And they'll do this small commercial is you can post for free at this point to get a regular listing. But we do have to police a little bit what people are posting because it's not good for business when you post a job for a HRIS Careers, job board, and it is not relevant to HRIS Careers, and you're just doing it because it's free, right? So now we've got job alerts going out, and we've got people unsubscribing because they're not relevant job postings, and that's bad for everybody. So it's a little commercial for HRIS Careers and advice if you're posting on our job board.
Yes, but it stems with the fact that it's always be relevant. Be relevant to where you are. Know the audience you're talking to. Like the audience you're creating on your job board is not for everybody. It is for a niche of individuals who want a particular role, needs particular support. And when you enter that, it's about taking those 2 seconds to kind of breathe and go, right, this is where I'm going to go and this is what we're going to do. And it's the attention to detail element that's so critical and quite frankly, just rush past.
Absolutely. And so I've got a couple of other real life situations that I may want to run past you, but I want to get to the lightning round. So I want to make sure we get that in before we have to let you go. So hopefully our connection's going to stay. There we go. Oh, it's nothing to be nervous about.
We can do this, right? Come on.
Like this, I guess this could be a party or this could be go nowhere. We will see. All right, so we're going to put some imaginary time on the imaginary clock. Now I'm going to ask the questions rapidly. Your responses do not have to be rapid. All right? All right, so let's go to number 1. What is the best and worst thing about running a business with your spouse?
Oh, okay, so the best thing, that's really easy, is he knows me so well. Okay, so let's put this into context. So I've known Mitch since I was 17. We got married when we were 21 and we're now 36. He knows everything about me. He knows my strengths, my weaknesses, and we're that married couple that really nicely we're as high energy as each other, but when it comes to skill sets in running the business, the tech sides, all this kind of stuff, we really nicely balance each other. And what's also really great about working with him is I've got really severe dyslexia. So there are some days where I just really, really struggle to get my words from my brain onto a piece of paper. And I can literally look at him and go like, Mitch, can you just give me 5? I need you to read this email because I'm not sure it actually makes any sense. I think it makes Gabi sense, but not any other sense. So he steps in and knows when I need help and what to do. The downside of running a business with your spouse is the fact that we do not talk about anything else, right? It literally, because we're so passionate about what we do, like the kids go to bed by them. I think like my second daughter's first word was raccoon, right? Because we talk about TooledUpRacoons. We talk about Boolean all the time. So I think it's like a default language. But you become, especially with 2 small children, our life is very much about them and the business and our clients. So when we're with the kids, it's about the kids. But as soon as the kids' heads hit the pillow, we're like, right, we've got to talk strategy. We've got to talk growth. We've got to talk business. And you're kind of sitting there going like, oh my gosh, we're just talking about the same thing over and over again. Where when we worked in different businesses, obviously we were kind of doing stuff, but it was different topics of conversation coming into place. So there you go. That's the negatives and the positives of working with the spouse.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Question number 2. Let's see. I got my grab bag here. What's the one piece of technology or software besides your own that, and we're going to keep this in the business context, that you couldn't live without?
My mobile? No, from a software perspective, honestly, the one piece of tech I couldn't live without is our CRM. So we use Zoho as our CRM. And as much as it's got so many apps on, I don't know if you guys have ever used it, but there's loads and loads of apps included in the product. But when you piece it all together, it's so powerful. So 100% couldn't live without my CRM.
So what's interesting, I heard you mention Zoho on a different podcast, and I was an early adopter. It had to be 2007, 8. I got on their CRM, and then and I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. I wonder if this could be a whole consulting concept. I was like, no, it won't. And now it's just grown and grown and grown to like a legitimate full-on platform that, like you said, you can do tons of different things and have your own recruiting system. And
I think it does need I think it could be a consulting business around it, because I'm very lucky, like piecing it together, because Mitch is so tacky. Like, honestly, he's our head of product. So I literally go, I want Zoho to do this. And he magically makes this stuff happen. I think if I was left under my own accord, I'd probably be like, it doesn't do stuff. But I actually think with a professional consultant in tow, Zoho could absolutely fly. And it's so flexible to do stuff with. So yeah, we've had it since 2013 and I'd never let it go.
Yeah, I know. I always would major corporations adopt this? That was always my question, because the clients we tend to deal with are Fortune 2,000, 3,000 people that are on, Oracle products. But yeah, I always wondered if that would be a possibility. All right. Question number 3. What is the one thing that comes up on your Instagram feed that you're embarrassed about?
Raccoons. Honestly, every time I go into my Instagram, there is a thing called Raccoon Island. And there's videos that come up of raccoons running around this island and people with pet raccoons and all this kind of fun stuff. But you know what really made me laugh is my sister came to visit me once and we were talking about the business. And obviously her phone was totally listening to us, because the next time she went onto Instagram, she had loads of stuff about doing her nails and her hair and her makeup. And then in came a raccoon video of a raccoon like running around being feral. And she was like, I hate you. You've ruined my Instagram feed. But that's the worst that happens. On Insta.
It happens. I know my wife gets cat videos, dog videos. She swore off Facebook years ago, and now all of a sudden she's trapped back into the Instagram thing.
Oh, God.
For me, it's basketball drills and otters.
Otters?
Love otters. Sorry. Otters, yes.
Random connection.
All right. Yes, that is. Question number 4. Wildcard destination. If you can take your family on a holiday anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go?
I would. That's a really good question. I would take them to the Dominican Republic. because that was was
right.
the place Mitch and I went on our honeymoon. So it'd be lovely to take both the girls back there.
That is a place that I have never been. I've heard very good things about it.
It's stunning. Just don't go through spring break. The first week of our honeymoon was so chill. The second week of our honeymoon was like spring break chaos. And honestly, I mean, it was great entertainment because I love people watching, but these kids were hammered. Like one guy, I remember he was walking through the pool holding like a pint in each hand. And you could just see him going under the water, but his pints were going above the water. So his arms were raising so they didn't get water in them. Mitch and I were like, oh my gosh, this is like perfect for people watching. But yeah, that's where I take them.
Yeah, I mean, if the youth in the United States could use that creativity for good rather than ingesting more alcohol, that'd be fantastic. Now, guilty as charged. I was there one day at some point in my life. But
no judgment.
Right. It is a thing. All right, and we're going to do this for the question number 5. Last question of the lightning round. If you could choose only one Boolean function to use for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, no, you can't ask me that. Honestly, I think that's the hardest question. It's like
giving up one of your children, right?
Oh my God, that's the hardest question I think anyone has ever asked me. And that shouldn't be that hard. Like most people are like, why?
Are you an and person? Are you an or person? Are you a wild card person? Right?
Well, do you know what, actually? What I'm thinking in my head is like the tech feature we have. There is one feature I couldn't live without in our tech, and that's combinations. So where actually you create a Boolean string, it breaks it down into its little sections, and then I can quickly take different elements of the Boolean string to talent map. I couldn't live without that. That would break me having to live without that.
I'll have to check that out. I will be the first to admit, in my everyday work, I'm usually in doing testing of applicant tracking systems, and there's just some real basic things. I'm usually looking up candidate IDs, and so it's not real complex. But like I said, I'm going to go reread that article and try and use some of these things. I feel like I'm way underutilizing Boolean in my day-to-day life, for sure. I know we have to get you out of here.
Speedy exits, like Gabi arrived, the raccoons arrived, we did some micro.
No. I'm going to drag you out a little bit because I still have, we'll have tons of questions. Maybe we'll have to do round 2 at some point. I know you'd have to get out of here to do your presentation. So let's talk about one other real life situation. So I'm on LinkedIn, right? And I want to get job alerts I just want it to give me if the word Taleo actually shows up in the job description or the title. If it doesn't, LinkedIn, I don't want it. That doesn't happen. So I've used just the word Taleo. I've used the word Taleo with quotes around it, but it still seems like it's almost, I'm not going to say smart enough, dumb enough to start bringing me things that are like Taleo. Like it's smart enough to bring things that are like Taleo or like ATS. Like it's almost trying to expand the search.
So first rule of thumb, so I'm a bit weird when it comes to quotation marks around words. So my first rule of thumb is most Boolean teachers or trainers talk about putting quotation marks around where there's more than one word. So if you had a software engineer, for example, you put the quotation marks around it. I'm sitting here as if you guys can see me on this podcast. I'm doing air quotes. Kind of forget where I am.
Right.
Just like, quotes. But what I actually do is there is a lot of platforms out there, job boards, social media platforms, etc., that are trying to be smart, but are therefore inadvertently being really dumb. So what I do to navigate that and stop them trying to suggest stuff that's irrelevant is I always put quotation marks around single word. The next challenge you have with platforms like LinkedIn, I assume, Troy, you're talking about LinkedIn Premium or Basic. Or are you talking about paid?
I think, this is just me as a candidate.
Okay.
Trying to get job alerts.
Yeah. So the challenge is when you're using kind of your basic or premium plans is there is a lot of data obviously held within LinkedIn, a lot of data. So actually what can sometimes happen when you're inputting a search, you will see information come back, but you'll be like, well, hang on a minute, I don't understand what's here. Sometimes it's because the data is within the database behind it, but because of the plan you're on with LinkedIn, you can't see it. If it is actually looking specifically at a job search, I've had it more times than I care to mention where they're just like, well, I can't find what you want. It doesn't matter what format you put it in. I'm not bringing you back anything. So you end up with like really random suggestions that are completely irrelevant. I actually just think that's a fundamental flaw within LinkedIn. Because honestly, if I look at the jobs I am suggested, I think one of the jobs I got suggested by LinkedIn was to become a psychologist. And it was a senior head of psychology at a department. And I was like, as much as I feel like a therapist to recruiters, it's completely irrelevant. So I don't think there's a lot of accuracy in some of these searches on LinkedIn, unfortunately, when it comes to job searches. But sometimes a really good way of trying to hone it in is actually look at other words people would have used. Similar to our example earlier where we had about Workday. So what other words could they have written on a job description to describe that role without using that word? So it's looking at the alternative. So maybe go and find a couple of roles that you may have applied to in the past for that particular function and have a look at the words used by the recruiter in that job description, and then use those to then build out a Boolean string of alternative ors that may actually refine it a bit more, or even throw in an and. So it's a real demand of I want this and something else combined. That's probably the cleanest way you can get around it. But we should actually do a live webinar from it. We can actually work through some examples like this with that job hunting process.
I've got so many ideas, and I have so many ideas for my clients. They would love to see what you do, especially in the context of Taleo and what they do and what they're dealing with. Oh, there's so much good stuff. All right, so I know we got to send you out here to get you to your presentation. Hey, we really appreciate you doing this. I've got as a matter of fact, the next piece of consulting I was going to get from you was, our job board.
Yep.
Part of it is people that post on our job board, but then there's a supplemental area where we have partners.
Yep.
And I had to write the Boolean to go and get the most relevant jobs to come into that section. So I was going to have you just completely rip me apart.
Do you know what? But you know what? I'm totally game for that. I did joke with Mitch that we should do some consulting work with tech platforms, like your job boards and things, to be like, look, give me access, let me go play. And I will literally be like, here's the downfall. This is how you fix it. Because I love that stuff, because the more I can use the power of what I know to help, the less challenges candidates had, the less challenges kind of talent acquisition teams, HR teams had finding talent. That for me is the golden point where we can actually bring the worlds together. So all you have to do, Troy, honestly, I will be there 1,000 times over. Just drop me a message. We can do a replay version 2.0 of this podcast. We could do a live. We can do some private stuff. I am there for it. If I can help you guys be better, I am there for it.
Oh, I really appreciate that. So before you go, again, we're going to have jam-packed show notes with all the links. I've found a bunch of things on your site that I want to make sure people pay attention to that I think will be really helpful. But where's the best places to go to connect with you?
So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn or via my email. Honestly, LinkedIn I live in. And actually, if you come connect with me on there, I do share a lot of kind of thought-provoking material, should I say, about challenges, experiences, and share a lot of what I know. So come and find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and actually come and say hi and talk to me about what's going on in your world. Because like I said earlier, if I can help you, I will be there for it. So yeah, come and say hi on LinkedIn. And Troy, also, you've got my email, free to share that around with everyone.
Excellent. Hey, again, we really appreciate it. To the HRIS Careers community, we'll see you next time.
There we go.